Welcome back to Corporate Finance, FINC2011 here in week 3, talking about part 2 of financial mathematics. So once again, if you have 4 out of the 5 needed information, you can find for the missing one. And then there are also additional calculations around compounding periods, effective versus quoted rates, and also APR, effective and effective annual rate, and then are calculations between the interest rates and the compounding frequency. But the main idea, once again with your calculator, is that if you have these 5 buttons, you have future value, payment, present value, interest rates, and the period. If you have these one of the 4 items, you could find a fifth. So every single question would be some sort of deviation between finding the fifth variable. So today's focus, once again, last time's focus was about finding the future value, the payment, and the present value. Today's focus will be more about finding the interest rate, some triangles around the interest rates, around effective versus quoted rates, and the compounding period. So in last week's modules, we all talk about compounding periods being 1 year. However, what happens if you have interests monthly, have interests bi-monthly, that's fortnightly or 2 weekly, or if you have interest every quarter, every half year. So today would be bringing what we know about time value of money into a future, into a further understanding by completing the 5 buttons. So once again, grab one of these calculators at the link below, BA2 Plus calculators. These financial calculators are really handy if you want to do financial maths, and eventually the CFA down the road. So yeah, let's minimize our screen. Let's get into the content of today's modules. So today, what we have here is week 3's content. So week 3's content is about interest rates. It is part 2 of financial mathematics. What we have here is the formula sheet. It is 1 page only so far. So last week we talked about the TVM calculations. Today we also added the effective annual rate, which takes the quoted rate and divided by the period. So that, once again, when we talk about compounding, our IY and our N must be the same period frequency. So if our interest rate is quoted at annual frequencies, then our compounding period, M right here, must also be annual. However, if our compounding frequency is semi-annual, then we have to divide the IY, or the interest rate, by 2, because once again, there are 2 half years in every single year. However, if our compounding frequency is monthly, then we have to divide the quoted annual interest rates by 12. So the idea here is that our interest rates must be equal in frequency. So let's get into the lecture here and the main source and meat of the material. Almost everything that will be tested will be from these slides. So learning objectives: be able to compute a periodic interest rate, number of periods, periodic payment, and assume other inputs are given in the present value or future value calculations. So this is what I am talking about. What we are doing here is we have 4 out of the 5 necessary inputs. Okay, so we have either the periods, or we have the interest rates, or we have the present value, or we have the payments, or we have the future value. Okay, so we have one of these, we have 4 of these out of the 5, and we have to calculate the missing variable. Now, if you have the calculator, all you just have to do is input them. If you don't have the calculator, we have the formula sheet here, but you will have a lot more hassle. Define effective annual rate and annual percentage rate. So this is the EAR and the APR. So effective annual rate includes compounding, and the annual percentage rate will be the quoted rate. However, once again, when we are talking about R, when we're talking about R in terms of these formula sheets, we are talking about the what is being used rather than just the EAR and the APR. Use appropriate rates or to evaluate cash flows and understand why the effective annual interest rate, EAR, is appropriate way to annualize interest rates. Okay. So last week we talked about an introduction to time value of money, and this week we're going to be talking about an extension of that, and this week we're arranging the formulas. So we know about this formula right here from last week. So once again, we have a variety of factors here, okay? We have future value, we have present value, we have for interest rates, and we have a compounding period. And because payment or the annuity is not given, we are assuming that there are no annuities here. So annual PMT will be 0. With these 4 functions, we could find anything that is missing, okay? And we could rearrange it to anything we want. So a number of situations could potentially arise where we need to calculate the interest rates. For example, for an individual investor or a company, it may be necessary to determine the return of an investment, the interest rates of a loan, or for a single cash flow perpetuity, we may be looking for what the return is, okay? So what we do is just we rearrange it, simple as that. There really isn't a lot to see here. So here's an example. If we invested in a project for 863.75 to them, in 5 years, the project would pay 1,000. What is the rate of return on this investment? Now, once again, we have our calculator here. So negative 1,000 will be the future value. The present value, 0 will be the PMT. The present value will be 863.75. That will be the present value. 5 would be the N, and compute interest rate. What that gives us is 2.9. I don't know if you could see that. Let me maximize my camera. 2.9277, okay, as the interest rate. And once again, that is 2.97, all right? So yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. Using a BA plus calculator. Alternatively, you could use the formula here, which is just a rearrangement of the future value formula. Finding the number of periods. Okay, so if you want to purchase a new car and are willing to pay 20,000, you can invest 10% per year. You currently have 15,000. How long would it take before you have enough money to pay cash for the car? So we're looking for how long. So we're looking for N. N is the missing variable. We have our interest rates of 10% per year compounded annually. So 10 would be IY. Present value is 15K. So 15K. 15K for the present value. 0 PMT. Future value is negative 20,000. Compute interest rate. What we get is 5.922. Is that right? No, that is not right, because we have 10% as interest rate. What we're looking for is N. N will be 3.01838. So that would be N, 3.018. So that is around 3.02. Okay. Finding cash flows. Here's a loan example. So once again, we have 4 and we're looking for the 5th. This is just the example of having 4 and looking for the 5th. All right, this is a good example. A mortgage and a loan. I think this would be interesting because there's also principal and interest payments. So you have just bought a second-hand car for 10K. You have needed to take a loan to pay this car, to pay for this car. The loan is for 5 years and the interest rate is 5% per year. You will make annual payments. So how much do you need to pay each year? So that's the first thing we need to find. So, okay, 0 is the future value because by the end you will pay down 10,000. 10,000. 10K, okay, 10K is the present value. What's the interest rate? 5% is the interest rate. How many years? 5 years is the N. So compute PMT. We have what do we have here? Well, let's maximize that again. 3209.748. Okay, so that is our annual payment using the cash flow calculation. Okay, so 3097, that is our total annual payments for every year. Okay. However, as we go year by year, our principal decreases, once again, because we're paying principal down. Because principal decreases over time, interest would also decrease over time. Okay? So because our total annual payments are decreasing our principal amount, interest decreases over time. So if we look at this column right here, interest decreases over time because our principal outstanding decreases over time. And because interest decreases, the component of principal as a percentage of total annual payment increases over time. So once again, this is what we calculated here for total annual payments. Let us do so total annual payments remains the same over time as the total as the principal decreases because of total annual payments over time, interest decreases, and as interest decreases, principal increases. As principal payment increases, as interest decreases as a component of total annual payments. So beginning balance of 10,000 subtracted of total annual payments plus interest is how much principal we have paid. And if we subtract the beginning balance with the total principal paid, then we get the ending balance. And ending balance because the principal beginning balance next year. And if we subtract the difference between total annual payment versus subtracted by interest, then we get the principal paid. How do we determine interest? Interest is simply 5% of the beginning balance. So 5% of 10K is 500. 5% of 8,190 is 409. And here we can see the relationship of how your interest paid would, as a proportion of total payments, would decrease over time, and amortization would increase over time. However, once again, your annual payments are all the same if you have a fixed rate loan. So that is an example of how time value of money would be incorporated into real life. Okay. Future value and compounding. Let's take a closer look at how compounding works. So this is about the frequency of compounding and the periods of compounding. Use the example of the next slide. We start with an original investment, which is the principal. In the first period, interest is earned on the principal. In the second and subsequent periods, interest accrues on the principal and interest earned in the previous period. So simple interest disregards compounding. However, compound interest includes both simple interest and interest on interest. So here is an example here. Suppose you have 100 to invest and you believe you could earn 10% per year over the next 5 years. How much would you have at the end of 5 years using compound interest? Once again, we know this example already. How much do you have in simple interest? So you do not have the compounding effect here. Here's the breakdown of the difference. Simple interest for less than 1 year. So once again, we are talking about if N is less than 1 year. Okay, so if we have an investment, for example, in a savings account, the savings account perhaps pays 1% per year. However, you only have your savings with the account for half of that time. What would you do if that's the example? Well, we take the discount factor and we multiply by the discount factor, which is 1 plus R times. This is how many days within the year you were vesting, how many days within the year you were compounding, and how many days of the year they are. Okay, so and then if you are only half of the time, then we do 1 over 2, because that's only half of the time that you are earning the interest. Once again, if you are only doing 1 out of 12 months, then you do 1 over 12. If you're doing 4 out of 12 months, then you do 4 over 12. Simple as that. Power of compounding. Variation of rates. So this is something to know of. So there are different types of rates. There are the APR, the annual percentage rates. This is the amount of simple interest earned without taking into the effects of compounding. There is EAR, which is the total amount, which includes compounding. So usually things are quoted in APRs. However, they also give compounding effects that are not taken into account. And then we have the equivalent end period rate, or R. This is the appropriate discount rate we use for calculating PV, future value, CNs, and little n's. So APR takes into account no compounding. It is the simple interest earned within a year. Interest rate quotes and adjustments. So once again, we need to do adjustments. If we are doing monthly compoundings, however, we have APR, then we need to divide the APR by 12 and make the N multiplied by 12, because we are adjusting the interest rate towards the period appropriate figures. And so this is how we are adjusting APR to EAR, which is a period appropriate figure. So if we look at this triangle right here, this sums up everything. When we are using the present value, the future value formula, what we want is we want to use R. Okay, we want to use R. If we are quoted APR, then we need to turn it into EAR and then turn EAR into R. Okay. If we're quoted EAR, then we could turn it into R. If we're quoted R, then we just have to use that. So APR does not take into account for compounding. Okay, so what we do to take into account for compounding is divide APR by M, which is the periods. So if we have monthly, then we divide by 12. If we have quarterly, we divide by 4. If we have weekly, we divide by 52 point something. And then we multiply the N by M, the N by M to get EAR. By EAR, we get to R. And that is our goal. So once again, this is a good overview of everything that we have learned in week 3 here in corporate finance. I hope you took something away. So take care and goodbye.